with a series of ugly to nightmarish policy options. What's driving the news? Energy prices continued to surge Tuesday after the EU moved a step closer to banning imports of Russian crude. U.S. crude prices rose to nearly $120 a barrel in early trading before easing back. Average gasoline prices appear poised to surpass the recent record high of $4.62 a gallon. The big picture: Russia is the world's second largest exporter of crude oil and the largest exporter of natural gas. Sanctions levied in response to its invasion of Ukraine upended energy markets, supercharged prices, and triggered a rush to secure supplies. In theory, the U.S., the world's largest crude oil producer, we have the reserves. We have the reserves to release. We just, of course, don't want to do that. Right. Wealth and technical know-how to boost production, offsetting some of the Russia shock's impact on inflation. In practice, unlike other energy superpowers, Saudi Arabia and Russia, for instance, the U.S. relies on a system of laws and market incentives to coax companies to pump more. U.S. leaders can't just pick up the phone and order a couple million extra barrels of production per day. The intrigue: though oil prices are up more than 70% over the last year, American producers have been slow to respond. Weekly domestic production is up roughly 7% over the same span, and it remains 8% below where it ended in 2019. Analysts cite a few key reasons that drills are idle. Number one, inflation. Costs for drilling materials and labor are up sharply and in some cases difficult to find. Uncertainty. Now, this is the part of the article that really fascinates me because I remember this back at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020 during the lockdowns. Do you remember when oil prices went negative? They were literally trying to find people to give oil away to because it couldn't move.
Right.
Lockdowns. It wasn't that long ago, during the worst of the COVID-related lockdowns, that oil prices went negative. Now they're at some of the highest levels on record. Such wild swings equal massive uncertainty for executives contemplating billions in spending to boost production in coming years. They're largely taking a pass. So, from that one passage in the article, because they literally couldn't give oil away during the pandemic, and now there's all this uncertainty, they're being asked to pump more they don't want to because of the uncertainty regarding inflation, costs for drilling, when clearly now that the lockdowns are over with and American society's more or less resumed back to normal, this is kind of a no-brainer. This is a choice they're making because they don't want to do it, I think, in my estimation. Shareholders have pushed CEOs to opt for near-term profitability over risky bets on future production. Right now, high prices are generating massive profits. Climate. With climate issues making a lower carbon future likely, oil companies are seeing little reason to make major long-term investments, while also paying their lobbyists millions of dollars to prevent advancements in green energy, right?
Yes.
It's all connected. Connect the dots, follow the money. So what's next? Some analysts are starting to game out what could be done to boost production and help bring down energy prices in the coming years. To do so quickly in an environment in which oil and gas investors are actively discouraging production growth would require a shift to a New Deal-like approach to energy policy, wrote analysts with J.P. Morgan in a recent report. With an unprecedented investment in U.S. exploration and production, along with a significant relaxation in regulations, the U.S. federal government could potentially encourage U.S. producers to grow crude oil output at a rate of more than 2 million barrels per day per year starting in 2024, they wrote. Getting to the bottom line, pledging to spend billions of taxpayer money, J.P. Morgan ballparks the cost of such a New Deal style response at $400 billion to subsidize already massively profitable energy companies would be political suicide. It would.
Yeah.
It would also fly in the face of efforts to decarbonize the economy. Duh. Far likelier options in the U.S. include subsidies to consumers to allow them to keep buying, or penalties like windfall taxes on oil companies for keeping prices high. That's still rough on the American consumer that relies on oil to now go back to work because their employers don't want them working remotely. We can't have that, even though I think the pandemic proved what a waste of gas and space with all of these rentals where companies operate when most of these jobs can be done remotely from home. The bottom line, with green energy transition still off in the hazy future and a growing list of giant oil producers like Russia, Iran, and Venezuela whose supplies are off limits, politicians throughout the West need credible plans to address energy costs over the next few years, and fast, if they want to stay in power.
So that brings us back to the whole issue of how we're dealing with basically what's a Keynesian economy. We've been working with FDR and the idea of government controls in order to manage the fluctuations in the markets. So rather than allowing the market to do its own self-management, we're now trying to control the ebb and flow so that there's a standard process across the entirety of the market, commodities markets especially. We've been doing it for the farm industry since 1930s, 1940s, when we were trying to do the recovery from the Dust Bowl era in the Great Depression, Tennessee Valley Authority, the idea of going in and creating electricity using hydroelectric power for a significant number of communities. The then barons of industry refused to take electricity to those communities because it wasn't profitable. Now we're back in the same boat where we've created a dependency upon oil that's so severe here in the United States, even as we've created situations that have caused severe instability in the oil market. And like you said, this goes back to the original of the pandemic. We stopped moving. We stopped buying oil, and that ramp up of production just as we got hit with the pandemic, boom, here we are. They couldn't give it away. They needed to move it because they were pumping stuff.
Yeah.
And they needed a place to put it. There was no place to put it, so they had to give it away. And they had to pay people to take it away. They had overproduced in preparation for the pandemic.
Well, so, I think they overproduced not expecting the pandemic to happen. They were pumping and then suddenly everything shut down. So it's like they continued pumping, not realizing how severe the lockdowns were going to be.
Right.
Yeah, people driving and needing to purchase gasoline.
So here we are, post-pandemic economic crashes. And this isn't the only thing. The oil market, the commodities market isn't the only one that's having the problem as a result of the way we basically shut things down. We were dealing with food shortages initially because people went out and they did the stock up. They did the emergency preparation. Everybody ran out and bought everything they could, which affected supply chains. We spent 20, 30 years developing this absolutely perfect niche, just-in-time supply chain, and it took all of 24 hours to screw it up.
Yeah.
And here we are. We're back looking at the issues of a government-created wild swing in the marketplace, and we have the government trying to control the swing they created. Only they're not having much luck with it. Rather than stepping back and just letting it settle, we're going through this entire process of everything that's going on. Now, see the stream here. You want to go ahead and bring up. Let's go ahead and bring. No, that's not the screen I want. There we go.
Hold on a second. I was getting something else ready. Here we go.
Okay.
Yeah, another oil-related study on how big oil is accused of trying to hijack democracy with spending on local ordinances that have to do with safety. They want to pull those back.
Okay, now that's dealing with the Ventura County out of California. So yeah. we're looking at what's going on with that. Now, the thing is this is not the first time big oil's gone in and done something like that. Dallas, I believe, had an issue where big oil went in and actually got city ordinances to allow them to drill in what was supposed to be a waterbed or an aquifer for oil, which was going to affect, water stability for the community. In Dallas, as a result, they actually were able to pay in order to start doing something there with that. So this isn't new. Big oil's been doing this an awful lot. And the idea that now we're actually contemplating subsidizing big oil going in to pay off these communities to allow them to do stuff that runs the risk of polluting, essential requirements like water. and food, as part of this process. It's starting to get a little bit dystopian here, Jerry.
It's not starting to get, Joseph. It is dystopian. I mean, some of the other stories we're going to go into, I think, just demonstrate how dystopian it's become as we talk about, well, as we're going to go into stories about police unaccountability and the SEC starting to mock and disparage retail investors who primarily prop up our stock market. And in this case, oil companies that want to roll back laws so that they can drill, and pollute the waterbeds in whatever community they're close by to. The map I was trying to bring up here, let me see if it works. I'd been trying to bring up a map here that showed all of the spills in the United States since 1986.
I got that one.
You got that one? Okay.
So this is what we're looking at.
There we go. Yeah. Right. That's what they want to ignore. That's what they want. The oil companies want us to forget and ignore. Those are all that's all spills, oil spills. Well, if you click the other check boxes, the crude oil spills and all the other different types of spills.
That's all the oil spills. If we actually do
map, it's going to be blue.
Okay. Well, they don't actually. Oh yeah, natural gas spills.
It highlights.
It
highlights the pipelines and shows
spills.
There we go.
And the rest of the pipelines. So as we continue to take a look at that, these are the spills. All of these are fossil fuel related. Gas distribution, the oil spills themselves. And we're looking at tankers, your trucking, railroad distribution. All of this comes into this same process. And then you're also looking at the pipelines, which we'll go ahead and pull those up here real quick.
Look, it's clear that there's a price paid for pumping in the U.S. The problem here is, look, we can't avoid the fact in lieu of green energy moving forward, this is what we're stuck with. But that the oil companies want to shut down the safety measures and shut down local ordinances is what's at a debate here. Why are they even allowed to propose that when we see the dangers of how oil spills go into our clean water supply and other environmental disasters? Let me read a little bit from the article that comes from Jessica Corbett from Common Dreams, just to put some perspective on this. Leading up to a vote on a pair of ordinances in California's Ventura County, an environmental advocacy group on Wednesday accused the fossil fuel industry of trying to hijack democracy. That charge from Food and Water Watch followed the Ventura County Star's new reporting on a big oil spending millions of dollars in a bid to defeat measures A and B, which the organization called an ominous sign for the country. Voters next Tuesday will weigh in on whether to uphold the measures, which were suspended shortly after being approved by the Ventura County Board of Supervisors in late 2020 to close loopholes used by energy companies to more easily drill new wells. As Food and Water Watch Central Coast Organizing Manager Tomas Morales-Rebecki put it after the vote was announced in February, for too long, the oil and gas industry has used antiquated permits as loopholes to drill wherever they want with no environmental review. And that's what's at issue here is the environmental review. The environmental impact, even on top of our precious groundwater resources or right next to our homes. Ventura County must vote yes on measures A and B to ensure consistent permitting for the oil and gas industry and the basic environmental regulations to protect public health. I guess people were getting mail-in ballots on this. Dirty energy interests are framing the local election in international terms. Stop the energy shutdown, FWW warned Wednesday. That misleading narrative is bad enough, but the risk is what the industry money will constitute a democracy shutdown. Your thoughts?
Well, and here's one of the problems. The reason why is because gas has gotten back expensive again, which, depending on whether or not you were paying attention with what was going on during the Obama presidency and the Clinton Secretary of State era, we were dealing with expensive price of oil And as a result, we are seeing a significant amount of fracking, globally, actually. Clintons were doing their best to sell fracking as a augmentation to the fuel supply all around the world. We were seeing it here in several places in the United States. We actually brought in a wildcat fracking organization to see whether or not they could actually extract oil here in the state of Idaho. That we continue to see problems with fracking in Oklahoma and other locations around the United States. And that's one of the things that's coming back right now, because the standard fuel reserves, fracking is profitable again right now under the current cost of oil. So again, it's not just the regular drilling. We are looking at the high pollution content of fracking in other forms, and we still do not have the infrastructure necessary to go to green energy systems. Matter of fact, right now, state of Idaho, we're looking at green energy concept, capability. The Pacific Northwest in general has always enjoyed a certain amount of green energy as being extremely hydro power centric. We've been able to run the dams that generate the power that power a significant amount of the Pacific Northwest, U.S. There's several other states that have been able to enjoy that as well. And at a time when we're dealing with an oil shortage and an energy shortage, and we're contemplating, the carbon footprint created by coal power plants, they're actually talking about blowing hydropower dams in order to facilitate environmental conditions for wildlife, in order to maintain biodiversity around, not just here in the United States, but globally. China's gone through a significant emphasis on creating hydropower dams with what is now, I believe, the largest dam in the world. So we are looking at these green energy capabilities that still aren't meeting our requirements. And boom, oil instability, because we keep locking people down so they can't travel. And now everybody wants everybody to go back to work, and we can't figure out whether or not we're going to walk to vacation over Memorial Day weekend or drive.
Yeah. Here where I'm at in the Midwest, I'm in Chicago, and when I do venture into Indiana, fields and fields of windmills generating green energy through the windmills. I don't see any of those in Illinois. I'm not sure what our big Democratic majority downstate is doing, or why they haven't integrated a program like that here in Illinois for all of the pandering that they do regarding, clean energy, green energy.
Now, and that's one of those things that's interesting. Isn't Chicago notorious for being called the Windy City?
Yeah, right.
If you're going to set up micro wind turbines any place in the United States, why would you not pick put wind turbines on the top of the tallest buildings in the windiest city in the United States to generate, green energy independent leads construction?
Or at least in the vast expanses of rural fields around the Chicagoland area, stretching all the way down to downstates.
And there's
no excuse.
Now there's an awful lot of people. We always got the NIMBYs, not in my backyard. It's great to have windmills. Just don't put them up anywhere where I can see them.
Right, the NIMBYs, not in my backyard.
Right. Yes. But that's the same thing. It's fracking. It's the windmills. Even when we're talking about solar plants, depending on which sort of solar technology we're using in order to generate the energy. Nuclear. A lot of our solar plants, a lot of our nuclear plants, all of it's about just heating water and generating steam to turn a steam turbine. These are.
Sorry, the ringer
That's all right. It happens. Find the button that turns off the sound of the latest.
And invariably, it's gonna be some spam caller wasting my time, and even though I'm on a no call list nationally, I still get these calls. Right.
We're talking about green energy and what the cost of green energy is these days in relationship to everything else. We are subsidizing green energy. We're subsidizing, a number of other types of energy, renewables, biodiesel, biofuels, these things that we don't have to drill for, that can absolutely fill the exact same role. We go back and take a look at the technologies that have been used in order to create engines for cars. What was it, 100 years ago when Henry Ford, first pumped out his Model T, and Standard Oil was the one that was the driver of choice for these motors. At the same time, all that was going on. Henry Ford had an electric car. Henry Ford had an alcohol-based car. All these different types of engine sources in order to move vehicles, move transportation. And so somehow we're down to diesel, and we're finally coming back to electric.
Well, there have been allegations that of an inventor, I think, creating a car that could run on water.
Right.
Many years ago, and that was quashed real quick. Or seawater or salt water. I don't remember what it was. I have to look that up.
Yeah. Nothing like separating water, just blow it all up, bringing it back together again.
Yeah.
Complete and total mess with relationship and all that. So we've been talking oil here for about 20, 25 minutes. And this is something we definitely need for the environmental activists, the environmental actionists, pay attention to what's going on in their community. Actually, let's go ahead and bring up your topic.
Hold on. Let me really, on a quick side note. Here's the guy who had the water-powered car. Did you realize he was mysteriously killed?
Yes. One of many, many stories.
How about that?
And there have been people that have tried to recreate his experiments in order to rebuild that. They've been mysteriously disappearing too.
Well, let me wrap up really quickly from the previous article just to really demonstrate this dystopian society you mentioned earlier. The Green Group, one of several backing Ventura County Save Agriculture and Freshwater for Everybody, also highlighted a warning from University of California, San Diego political scientist Thad Kucer, who said earlier this year that, quote, direct democracy like our representative government is vulnerable. We have unequal access to the ballot right now. It's no longer the people's process. It's not. It's the corporate dystopian states of America is what it is.
Yes, and it's been that way for about 40 years. Ever since Reagan went in with his trickle-down economics, we've been slowly funneling, tailoring the new America to favor corporatism, particularly corporate monopolies of multinational corporations, which continues to be more and more problematic. So, quick hit here from Extra Bulla. One bubble. There we go. Planet of Humans opened my eyes about some renewables. Solar panels and wind turbines are cool, but if the parts they are made from aren't recyclable, what's the point? Okay. In order to create biofuels, we need trees. Absolutely. Some of the things that we look at, hemp production. Hemp has been known to be able to produce biofuels. Hemp create building supplies. It's one of the few that has truly become a universal based on the research people have done with regards to it as far as biofuels, bioconstruction materials, and in general, carbon sink in general, to pull carbon out of the air and out of the environment. Yet it's one of those least advertised, it's one of those least produced, and it's one we don't talk about in order to maintain profitability of certain other industries. So Extra Bullet, strong point. So Jerry, let's go ahead and hit the next topic here.
Our police are not accountable for our safety, Joseph. I think everybody's been following this. I don't even have words for it. This disaster out of Texas that defies explanation as far as responsible, accountable law enforcement. So this comes from Joshua Fechter, Reese Ochsner, and Uriel J. Garcia from the Texas Tribune. Narratives and blame shift again as dysfunction engulfs shooting probe. The Texas Department of Public Safety said the Texas Department of Public Safety said a local police chief had stopped cooperating It also walked back a statement that a teacher had propped open a door used by the shooter to enter the school. The cops were going to blame a teacher for leaving a door open, and that was untrue. Now, there's a gap in, I guess, the 911 call recordings that people have asked to review. I guess the local investigators have asked to review. And there's speculation now also that the cops may have shot a kid, and maybe that's why that audio from the 911 was suppressed or not provided, because they've got audio recordings of them going in and a kid saying, they shot me. They, meaning more than one person, which would lead one to believe that maybe it was the police. Anyway, going into the article. The official response to the mass shooting at an Uvalde elementary school, a response already marred by shifting narratives, finger pointing, and a general lack of timely and accurate information, took a further turn towards dysfunction on Tuesday. The Texas Department of Public Safety said Uvalde School District's Police Chief Pete Arredondo, who made the decision to wait for more resources rather than confront the gunman sooner, has stopped cooperating with state investigators and had not responded to requests for information for over 2 days. Arredondo contests the claim. Like, why wouldn't you want to, give them whatever they need to exonerate yourself? Because you're covering shit up.
Right.
And the agency walked back an assertion that a teacher at Robb Elementary School propped open a back door prior to the shooting, allowing the gunman to enter and kill 19 students and 2 teachers. Earlier Tuesday, the teacher's lawyer had pushed back on the state's account. Texas Rangers. I love the Texas Rangers. With their big cowboy hats, and their guns, and it's like
they're a classic. They're an icon. They're American legends.
Yeah.
In law enforcement.
They can't force Arredondo to provide what they need for their investigation. So Texas Rangers investigating the response to the shooting want to continue talking to Arredondo, but he hasn't answered a request made 2 days ago for a follow-up interview, according to 2 DPS spokespeople. That's when the Texas Rangers should go in, handcuff the motherfucker, haul him out, put him in a room under bright lights, and demand he start answering their questions, the way they do with any other suspect related to covering up information.
Right. Yeah. Now,
why is this guy given any leeway whatsoever? Any leeway whatsoever? He is basically helping cover up the information. He is what's the word? He is interfering with an ongoing investigation by not responding to what the Texas Rangers are asking him. And it's okay. He can wait 2 days to get back to him or more, and he hasn't gotten back to them.
Yeah. And there's the time, but ultimately what this comes back to is, if you're not guilty of anything, what are you hiding? Talk to us. The thing is if anybody's familiar with the law, which this police chief is, even if you're innocent, you don't talk. But is a government official who's trying to advocate for transparency, and be able to correct the situations, correct what went wrong with their entire process, how do you justify not telling the public, what you learned about probably the biggest mistake in your career, and then just take the hit, retire, quit, whatever. Because
it's gonna shine light on why his ass should be booted out now. Why he should lose his job and he should lose his pension.
Absolutely.
How many years has it been since Columbine that measures were instituted, safety measures, drills to schools, all this stuff, and nothing has changed? Nothing has changed.
Right. Okay. Now, to be fair, there have been an awful lot of changes. Okay. The school security in an awful lot of places has definitely been beefed up. In the last 5 years, when was the last time you actually went to a school where you didn't have to be buzzed in? I know here in the state of Idaho, which has always had a low incidence rate of this, security at schools, you cannot get into a school except through a single access point, and you're buzzed in by somebody who has to vet you in some way, shape, or form in order to get into the next stage of the building. And it's, in most cases I'm familiar with, it's a double entry process.
Where's the explanation for how this guy got in, since they couldn't blame the teacher for leaving the door open?
Exactly. So they're talking about how long some things, There was rumor that the gunman had actually been outside of the school for close to about 20 minutes, popping off rounds before somehow he got into the school and started doing the shooting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we're dealing with this whole situation. This goes back to the whole Broward County in Florida incident. You know, you have a police officer who's on the scene, who's responsible for the safety of the children in the school, yet for whatever reason, he has decided it is in his own best interest not to confront the shooter. And this goes back to the Supreme Court, years ago, saying, yeah, we get it, but ultimately the police have no duty to protect.
Then why are we paying and arming them and throwing more money into their budgets and giving them military grade equipment that we've recycled from our wars overseas and giving them? Did you see the pictures of the Uvalde police posing in their really
SWAT? Oh God, yes. And this was one of the things a friend of mine actually brought up. The whole SWAT team pose. That's not there to inspire confidence in the community building of your police. It's like, we're badass son of bitches, and if you don't do what we tell you, we're going to shoot you.
But if we find out that you're in a schoolroom and we don't know where you are, we're going to stay outside because we fear for our lives. Do you hear firemen faced with a burning building saying, "Sorry, I'm not going in. It's too scary. I fear for my life." Or doctors or nurses during COVID, I don't want to treat that patient. I fear for my life.
What is it?
The police don't have a responsibility related to the privilege of serving and the fact that they are paid for they're supposed to make a decision before they go into law enforcement whether they want to risk their lives or not during. And they don't want to. They're coddled, they're enabled, they're entitled, they're bullies. They just decide they're above all the rest of us. And there's this culture, Joseph, in America. We see this a lot here in Chicago, too. We talk about it all the time over here on Chicago Corner, how the police just don't feel they are obligated to provide any accountability, despite the fact we are supposed to rely on them for protection. And that doesn't seem to be what they're there for.
Welcome to Chicago gun laws. There's a reason why there's no songs out there saying "fuck the fire department." But yeah, it's the Chicago gun laws. The police have no duty to protect you. They have, Jimmy Dorcon in here from Extra Bola.
Yep.
Cops' jobs are to make sure I get home safe, not themselves.
Extra Bullet. That's actually where I found this story. Jimmy had done a whole segment on this, so I went and found the corroborating articles. But he's right. He's right.
That is what we pay them for. Except as we've taken a look, 1970s, ever since we instituted Nixon's drug law, they're no longer about serve and protect. It's all about revenue generation for the state. We've seen the fact that right now in the United States, police are responsible for more revenue generated through civil asset forfeiture than is actually lost through burglary and theft by criminals. That crossing point where the people who are hired to serve and protect now steal more from the community than the people they're hired to protect us from.
We've got our red light and our speed cameras here in Chicago that were only supposed to be put outside schools and parks, but those schools and parks are like blocks away from where the cameras are out in the most heavy traffic sections. So it's all a revenue grab, man. And they still cry that they don't have enough money. They still cry, we're poor, we're poor, we're poor. We don't have money for our South and West Side communities here in Chicago, but we got money to invest in all of the tourist attractions downtown. We got money to pour into protecting Streeterville and the Loop, even though we really don't, because a lot of shootings have been going on down there also. But that's their prime area that they're worried about protecting to make sure that it doesn't scare away tourism.
I thought the point of going to Chicago was to get shot at, just really,
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a little bit on the dark side. I remember, being in Afghanistan, that opportunity I got to drive into Kabul, with one of the black teams, and so I could go visit one of their sources. It was like I'm driving into Kabul in this, low profile black SUV that is so out of place in Kabul. Yeah, and walking through the community and looking at the little urchins on the street and, the shop dealers working off of the sidewalks. And it's like, I'm safer here than in Chicago.
Our problem here in Chicago, Joseph, is that our mayors, the present and the past, are engaged in the definition of insanity. They're doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And the same thing over and over again is throwing more money at the cops, throwing more efforts into incarcerating people instead of investing and creating proactive solutions, investing in the communities, reopening mental health clinics, reopening schools, investing in communities that are literal food deserts where people don't have cars to travel to the next neighborhood, maybe a mile or so away to get their groceries. The city, our leadership here, is more interested in punishment and solutions that are related to incarceration and enforcement than perhaps changing circumstances in these communities where so many people are lured to crime because they have no hope. They have no other solutions. It's like the third or fourth generation of families that are dealing with the same problems that our city leadership doesn't feel is important enough to address. That's why people, drift to crime. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of bad apples that decide it's the easier solution. But when you've got generations of people in the city growing up in a household that it was the same for them prior, no opportunities, they're living in areas of the city that are like demilitarized zones like you'd see in Kabul, like vast expanses of like blocks of buildings that look like had bombs dropped on them. This is the problem in Chicago, and we talk about it every Tuesday and Friday on Chicago Corner. It always, ends up into the conversation with whatever stories we're covering here, and the high rate of crime, shootings, and everything else.
And you step back and you take a look at it. A lot of the reasons why they don't have those options in those communities.
Right.
It's race-based legislation. Yep. It's union protectionism. It's the Irish unions that didn't want the black workers involved in it, that created the ghettos.
Yep.
And you now have licensures that are handed by the city, which has always had a particular kind of rulership. So you're with a particular kind of ethnic heritage or ethnic background saying, you're the wrong skin color to go to this particular union and be able to get an apprenticeship card. And if you don't get the apprenticeship card, you can't work in this career. And if you're not working, and if you try and use one of the other options, it's going to cost you $20,000 to get your hair, get your barber's license.
Yeah.
So if you don't have your barber's license, when we show up at your barber shop that you're running out of your back room in your house, we're going to arrest you and take your stuff, do the civil asset forfeiture, hang on to your stuff so that you can't cut hair and make money to pay to get licensed. So you just continue to see this devolving situation. Yeah, everybody's been going to the same guy to get their hair cut for the last 20 years. Why is he suddenly getting arrested? Well, because now there's a new licensure fee that he didn't pay because he didn't know about it.
It's institutional and civic racism that people don't realize is actually,
it is.
And we're the most segregated city in the country, hyper segregated.
Right? Welcome to Chicago. Welcome to Flint, Michigan. Sorry, we cannot be bothered to upgrade the water system. You're just going to have to drink lead until you die.
We still have pipes here too. Lead in our water.
That's one of the things. The institutional segregation, the civic, despite 40 years, we are still doing a separate but equal concept while denying these key communities opportunities for class mobility or even the ability to leave because, like you said, we can't afford gas to leave Chicago. They can't afford the $50 to get on a bus just to go somewhere, anywhere else. So you're looking at this institutionalization that goes on. And a lot of it is because control of access to markets is being managed by people who appreciate the fact that they have the access that they're denying everybody else.
Speaking of that, that's a great transition into our next story.
Yes. Welcome to the commodities market. Yes.
Let me run the video first. So I don't know how many people have seen this, but the SEC funded with taxpayer dollars, instead of investigating down dark pools, instead of investigating and charging all of these hedge funds that are clearly under the light of day manipulating our markets and preventing fair and equitable movement in the market, this is what the SEC chose to spend dollars on and released the other day. Now, keep in mind, Joseph, and our viewers, this is not just on YouTube. The SEC is running this on Comedy Central. They're running this on cable stations. Ad time is not free.
No.
Ad time costs millions and millions of dollars. So when we have that rat, Gary Gensler, talking to Jon Stewart in an interview not too long ago saying the SEC barely has money for coffee in their coffee break rooms, this is what their money's being spent on.
Are we? What kind of? Okay.
Brad, it's your investment.
I'll take meme stocks. Invest.
Ouch. Your investment, Julie.
I'm going to do some research first.
Well played, Julie. Well played.
You can do research. Investing is not a game. Always do your research before making an investment decision. Learn more at investor.gov. Before you invest, investor.gov.
Okay, so the SEC in many articles has identified GME as a quote-unquote meme stock, right?
Yes.
Isn't this market manipulation? And when they're basically telling retail investors meme stocks are not a worthwhile investment while they have identified what they think meme stocks are, while they're ignoring how the hedge funds, Citadel, all the others are manipulating the market. This is a last-ditch effort, too, I think, regarding the collusion between the hedge funds and the SEC, because retail investors are not selling. They realize what the fuck's going on. They realize that hedge funds have not covered, okay? They have not covered their short positions. That's why they're not selling. And when you've got all this fear, uncertainty, and doubt now being stoked by the SEC, it really leads you to with no other conclusion other than the SEC is in bed with these fuckers.
Well, we know that. It's been that way for 20, 30 years right now. You know, we're looking at the SEC. We're looking at the Treasury. We're looking at the Federal Reserve. You know, all of these people are tied in. The amount of money that's been pumped into not just the SEC, but the stock exchanges and the commodity exchanges, especially during this pandemic era, you know, $20 trillion. Where'd that $20 trillion come from? Where'd that $20 trillion go to? You know, the money supply right now has changed so dramatically because of the market manipulation and everything that's been associated with it. You know, the $1,600 you got as your child tax credit, you know, out of that $20 trillion that the Federal Reserve injected into the economy in order to save us during the pandemic, you know, so that we could afford to buy that extra expensive price gouged toilet paper, you know, and it all cycles back. So right now we're looking at this sort of backdoor market manipulation recovery opportunity by SEC invested propaganda.
Do you remember the housing crash in 2008? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so, that one hurt me a lot.
Load this video I just uploaded. Hopefully it'll stream from my desktop.
Okay. That's what I want to do right there.
Next to it.
Oh yeah, this one.
That serves as a nation within the midst of a financial meltdown. In 2008, employees at the Securities and Exchange Commission who were supposed to be the watch dogs all of this were surfing for pornography. While some as much as 8 hours a day. Their Inspector General's investigation lasted 5 years, found 33 employees that violated commission rules and policies. Could something like this for up 8 hours? It's someone guys, that's the issue part. They didn't even.
It's probably what they still do. They know they look at open stocks. As long as funds do not short position, things going to pop like a pimple. And the rate to borrow these shares to continue shorting them, I think, is up to 30% now. And the hedge funds just keep doubling down. They don't care paying the millions of interest and the rates on borrowing the shares to continue to try to drive the price of the stock down with synthetic shares, because they know when the day comes it's going to completely bankrupt them. So now you got the SEC on their side trying to scare other potential retail investors who don't even want to police these heads that are literally destroying our economy and our stock market with their manipulation.
Yeah. I'm going to take a moment here and reduce some of the screens we got here in the background. Okay, there we go. Yeah, we're trying to work with the background noise that's going on that's affecting our YouTube bandwidth. Sorry about that, Dolores and Robert. Hopefully we've freed up some of that bandwidth. There we go. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we freed up enough bandwidth now that we're back on track. But yeah, no, it's the SEC, it's the propaganda. I think part of the thing is we're looking at different institutions involved in our government, in our organizations, are learning how to manage and manipulate the propaganda from each other. You know, we're seeing war stocks continue to develop associated with issues in Ukraine and against Russia. We're seeing housing market associated with higher costs coming up. The amount
and we're seeing our Congress people with knowledge of what the government's going to do, engaging in insider trading without any kind of consequences whatsoever. Nancy Pelosi, right? A whole list of
Pelosi and her husband, ungodly amounts of money. You know, concepts as far as doing the high-speed rail through Western California. You know, their inside trading has allowed him to purchase key properties where the government's supposed to buy using eminent domain, providing a fair price, which we all know won't be fair because there's a politician who's going to get a lot of extra kickback off of the price that it's finally bought at because the government's subsidizing the purchase.
You'd think with all that insider trading profit that Pelosi's husband could have afforded an Uber driver instead of driving drunk, right?
You would think. You would think. Yeah, but of course he's above the law, so you know why would that bother him? He can literally buy himself out of that. Yeah.
Let me read from this article a little bit. Okay. Not only are most retail investors shocked and appalled and insulted by those videos, but the former branch chief of the SEC was disappointed by the stock video. The SEC meme stock video is circulating all over social media due to its surprising and unprofessional attack on retail investors. The agency was created in the 1930s after the Great Crash to prevent fraud and protect retail investors from predatory practices conducted by Wall Street. But something happened along the way. The branch has proved to take a stance with Congress in tailoring policies for financial institutions. Who's going to protect retail investors from the corrupt? Former SEC branch chief expresses her thoughts on the propaganda published by the SEC. Let's discuss it. We watched the meme stock video. Now, the former SEC branch chief Lisa Braganca said she was very disappointed to see the SEC disparage investors in meme stocks as if they must have done it thoughtlessly, especially when the SEC permits most trading to take place in dark pools. Then she tweeted, "How about a video on dark pools, Gary Gensler?" Lisa Braganca is an activist who fights for market transparency. She's talked on Matt Corr's channel before and has done an AMA on Reddit Superstonk answering questions about self-regulatory regulations, SEC regulations, and SEC enforcement. Gary Gensler admitted in a Bloomberg exclusive 90 to 95% of retail orders don't go through the lit exchange, but failed to mention a solution to the problem. What does that mean? It means that when they route them to the quote-unquote dark pools, off the lit exchange, private pools, they can report the results of that movement days, a week later, so that it actually interferes with the daily reporting of what that stock's value is. The lit exchange is what the stock's really worth. When it goes to the dark pools, they're preventing showing what the stock is really worth because they're delaying the information regarding the movement. The hedge funds, the market makers, the ones who do payment for order flow. And you know who created payment for order flow? What was his name? The guy who ripped off all the rich people in New York.
Madoff, Bernie.
Yeah, Bernie Madoff created payment for order flow. He was convicted, thrown in jail for ripping off rich people, but naturally they kept his payment for order flow scheme in place for other hedge funds to take advantage of. In an interview with Jon Stewart, the SEC chairman fails to be in productive discussion on solving problems in the market. Jon Stewart described Gary Gensler as a sheriff in a town that allows blatant corruption to occur. For Gary, it's clear it's more about keeping the job than creating a legacy. The SEC's meme stock video might try to portray retail investors as young and clueless novice investors, but that's far from who the retail community is. Retail investors outsmarted hedge funds, exposed the corruption in the SEC, mainstream media, and are now attacking with this propaganda. It's a sign. The retail community is made up of a very diversified group of people all fighting for the same cause. And this is a threat to corporate media and powerful institutions, and I'm going to add, that want to keep people poor, that want to keep people in a serf economy. Republicans and Democrats getting together to fight for market transparency. What? But this isn't just about the left and right getting together to combat corruption. It's a global movement. And opposers don't like this.
No, they don't. And it's one of those things that we continue to see with regards to the market economy. Right now, we have investors that are actually using hedge funds, savings, Percy retirement accounts, state-owned retirement accounts. Here we have hedge funds, retirement accounts being managed by hedge fund managers that are currently investing in economies, buying rental properties so that they can Airbnb, driving up the price of the properties in communities all across the United States, so that the people whose retirement funds they're managing can't afford to pay the taxes on their houses.
Well, not only that, they want to seize up all the property economy. They don't want people to buy houses.
No, they want them renting.
Right.
Which is a perpetual income. You no longer are able to buy your house in 15 years. You're renting for life.
Can you bring up the screen with this tweet that's shared by Trace Trades, who I follow on YouTube? Great young man. He's in his early 20s, military officer. What does Trey share? How about instead of the SEC making fun of meme stocks, they, fix the problems that created the meme stocks? Payment for order flow, off-exchange trading, prime brokers, arbitrage, naked shorting, derivatives leverage. Guess that'd make too much sense. Activism matters. Retail investors must continue to raise awareness of these issues despite the propaganda. The SEC has ignored retail's cries for help, and now they've made fun of the community with this meme stock video. Does this unprofessionalism in our government surprise you? Look, you know what it did, Joseph? It pissed a lot of people off who, as they've been driving the price of the stock down today, it's a sale. More people are buying.
Yeah.
More people are buying.
Fire sale. Well, that's literally where we're at because we have allowed the SEC to become a U.S. institution. The Commodities Exchange, it's an institution. The Federal Reserve institution, literally all of these institutions all created to solve a problem with the understanding that if the problem is ever solved, the institution goes away. Where's the incentive for the institution to actually solve the problem?
There's no incentive.
No, there is none. And it goes back to Gary and the fact that he wants to keep the job. Well, in order to keep the job, you have to keep the institution.
Apparently, a lot of members of the SEC have been leaving their positions. They've been resigning because they do not want to be associated with the disaster that Gensler is overseeing.
Well, I mean, we're seeing that in an awful lot of offices, institutional offices across the United States right now. We're seeing that with Department of Education under DeVoe. We're seeing that as populists are taking over key seats in the states. Adjutant generals, they're losing their staff because they don't want to work with a new guy who's likely to be elected as the AG. Secretaries of state, treasurers, they're realizing that, like, wait, the guy's winning on a populist crackpot idea. And dude, I don't want to work under that kind of pressure validating, his pet conspiracy theory. So we're losing quality people in these institutions, watching them crash and burn, watching the experience from these institutions as power brokers, the narcissistic sociopathic variety that come in and say, yes, I own the institution. I am the institution.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, well, the institution was never on solid ground in the first place. With you as the institution, what can we honestly expect from it as things move forward? And literally, we're watching the demise of, Rome 4.0 right now, as everything continues to fall apart. And an awful lot of these people who have these grand ideas about what the institutions mean for them, with them in charge, have very little idea as to how it actually functions. Even within a Keynesian economy, if you're looking at Austrian versus Keynesian, if you're looking at the concept of fiat currency versus, commodity-backed currencies, if you're looking at the different ways economies can be managed all across the United States, globally, and of course, you talk Joe Firestone and his MMT, modern monetary theory. How do you manage, fiat currency, in relationship to the way we've been doing it here in the United? Honestly, we're running a record here. We've been able to run a fiat currency for 50 years. That is historically unheard of.
Absolutely.
So here we are. We're watching our institutions literally go into a meltdown because the people in charge right now have no idea why some of the rules were created for these institutions in the first place. We're watching people go, I don't understand why that's there. Yank it. 6 months later, oh, that's why that was there. Too late to put it back.
And with that, I'm going to log into my Schwab account and buy some more AMC. It's on sale.
There you go, Jerry.
I'm not a financial advisor, but I love the company. I love the stock.
Robert brings up a good point on the housing commodity exchange right now.
Yeah, I saw that comment.
Yeah, absolutely, Robert. We're already seeing tenant unions in states that are anti-union. The whole right-to-work state concept that has done away with unions in the past. You're seeing tenant unions come together and say, you know what, we're going to buy the apartment complex. We're going to turn this apartment complex into an intentional community. And guess what? We're not going to let the cops come in and arrest our barbers. We're going to run gardens on the rooftop. We're going to set up little windmills so we're off the city electric grid so the city will stop charging us money. We are seeing more and more of that in communities.
I hadn't even thought of that. That makes so much sense for buildings, co-ops and buildings to put windmills on their roofs to help generate their own energy.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It's all ideas that are coming. And
solar too. A lot of people have embraced solar, which has been available since the 1970s. Jimmy Carter put solar panels on top of the White House to basically help move this forward, to which Ronald Reagan decided to remove them to fillet the fossil fuel industry to show his support for them.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And it's interesting. We're watching all of this, go back and forth. Some of us have been alive long enough. Here we are on social media talking about things that we grew up with, things that we saw when we were a kid, the way things have changed, gone back, moved forward, the 2 steps forward, 1 step back, only now we're doing 2 steps back, 1 step forward. And we're trying to figure out, how can we just stop stepping back and build on the lessons learned? How can we build on understanding the mistakes we made over the last 50 years? Yes, we've made progress. Yes, we've lost a lot of that progress. And a lot of us are in that situation where right now we have forgotten more about how we got where we are.
Yeah, sadly.
So with that, we are at an hour, folks. Thank you for joining us. Jerry, absolutely fantastic conversation. Really.
Yeah, it's fun to join you for the first time. I've been here with Shane, and I've been here with Jimmy, and now I can take the honor of co-hosting with you, Joseph. Anybody interested in following what I do here in Chicago, I'll be broadcasting tonight at 7:30 on the YouTube channel Chicago Corner. I also help Kit Cabello at Hardlands Media on Tuesdays co-host the national show. Tuesdays, Chicago Corner is also live with my colleague Kira McCollum. Tune in then also. A lot of good stuff coming out of Chicago coverage, how we want to share what's happening here and hopefully propose solutions, not just bitch about it.
And you can follow me, Idaho Joe for Congress, on Twitter. I have my Wednesday evening show, Cup of Joe with Idaho Joe, every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Mountain, 8 p.m. Eastern. If you're in one of the other time zones, do the math, folks. Yeah. And I'm getting together on another project of mine with some of our local libertarian candidates for Libertarian Round Circle. Talking Austrian economics and policy issues with related to government, bodily economy, medical marijuana, and hemp, biofuels. So join me Wednesday here on KRTD Media. Follow my Twitter. Find out when we're doing our Sunday episodes for Libertarian Round Corner. Love you guys. And with that, peace.